Well, with regards to retaking territories, it seems inexplicably, whenever you eliminate one threat, say be it Ghouta, another threat seems to materialize, and this has happened repeatedly. Now we have the Israeli energy minister who is threatening that his country could, quote, liquidate you and your government. Are you afraid? Are you afraid, and how do you take that threat?
Since we were born, I'm talking about my generation, and most of the generations now in Syria, we lived under the threat of the Israeli aggression. This is something in our unconscious feeling. So to say that you're afraid while living with the same threat for decades, this is nonsense. Israeli has been assassinating, killing, occupying for decades now, for more than around 7 decades in this region. But usually they do all this without threatening. Now, why do they threat in this way? This is panic. This is kind of hysterical feeling, because they are losing the dear ones. The dear ones, Al-Nusra and ISIS. That's why Israel now is panicking recently, and we understand their feeling.
Well, Israel is now seemingly striking across Syria, airstrikes at will. They're boasting publicly on camera again and again that your defenses, they're powerless to stop them, that they can do in Syria whatever they want. Is that true? Is there anything you can do to stop Israel carrying out its airstrikes in Syria?
Yeah. Actually, the first target of the mercenaries in Syria was the air defense. Before attacking any other military base, it was the air defense. And you would be surprised at that time, why do they attack the air defense? The air defense will not deal with the peaceful demonstrators, as they say, or the moderate forces, and it cannot deal with extremists anyway. It's another thing, is to defend the country. This is the other proof that Israel was in direct link with those terrorists in Syria. So they attacked those bases and they destroyed big part of our air defenses. Now, in spite of that, our position, let's say our air defense is much stronger than before, thanks to the Russian support, and the recent attacks by the Israeli and by the American and British and French proved that we are in a better situation. Now the only option, my answer to your question, is to improve our air defense. This is the only thing that we can do, and we are doing that.
Well, Israel says that its strikes are so far that they aren't targeted against you, the president or the government, that they're targeted at Iran. They're to keep Iran, which is your ally, weak in Syria. It's strange, but Iran being here, they are your allies, it's no secret, they have helped, but them being here now puts you at threat. Would you ever consider asking Iran to leave?
The most important fact regarding this issue, that we don't have Iranian troops. We never had, and you cannot hide it. And we were not ashamed to say that we have. Like we invited the Russians, we could have invited the Iranians. We have Iranian officers who work with the Syrian army as help, but they don't have troops. And the starkest fact about their lives, about this issue, the Iranian issue, that the recent attack a few weeks ago, they said that they attacked Iranian bases and camps, as they said allegedly. And actually we had tens of Syrians, martyrs and wounded soldiers, not a single Iranian. So how could they say that we have it? So it's a lie. We always say that we have Iranian officers, but they work with our army. We don't have troops.
Well, changing subject now with regard to chemical attacks. There are now regular alleged chemical attacks happening in Syria. Your government and your allies have said that you had nothing to do with this. Your allies have backed your claims, denying, any responsibility, saying they have no knowledge of you carrying out these attacks. The question is, in whose interest is it to gas opposition to you?
That's the most part of the answer. In whose interest? That's the question. Is it in our interest? Why? And why no? Because the timing of this alleged strike was after the victory of the Syrian troops in Ghouta. Let alone the fact that we don't have chemical weapons anyway, and let the other fact that we're not going to use it against our people, because the battle in Syria was about winning the heart of the civilians. This is the main battle, and we won it. So how can you use chemical weapons against civilians that you want them to be supportive to you? This is first. Second, if you want to use it, let's suppose that you have it and want to use it. Do you use it after you finish the battle or before or during? It's not logical. Second, if you go to that area, it was very cramped area by armies, by factions, and by civilians. Whenever you use such armaments or weapons in that area, you're going to harm everyone, something that didn't happen. And if you go to that area and you ask the civilian, there was no chemical attack by anyone. Even the Western journalists who went there after the Ghouta was liberated, they said, we asked the people, they said, we didn't see any chemical attack. So it was a narrative, it was just pretext in order to attack Syria.
Well, it may have been a pretext, but we now have proof that, even mere rumors on Twitter, a few videos of confusing videos of showing allegedly the aftermath of an attack is enough to justify for the United States, its allies, launching cruise missiles at Syria. What if, conveniently, there's another attack, alleged attack? Could there be a lot more missiles aimed at Syria?
Of course it could, because when the United States trampled over the international law on daily basis, sometimes in different areas for different reasons, any country in the world could have such an attack. What the legal base of this attack, what the legal base of their aircraft with their alliance, the so-called anti-terrorist alliance that support the terrorists actually, what the legal base of that alliance? Nothing. What the legal base of the attack in Yemen, in Afghanistan, on the border with Pakistan, etc. There's no legal base. So as long as you don't have international law that could be obeyed by United States and its puppets in the West, there's no guarantee that it won't happen. That happened a few weeks ago, and that happened last year in April 2017, and that could happen anytime. Exactly, I agree with you.
But the response Trump promised was going to be extreme and severe, according to his words early on. The response that we saw, the strike that we saw after the latest alleged chemical attack, it seemed to be much more symbolic, much smaller in scope, and there was inexplicably, again, a delay when Trump promised the attack and when it came. Why was there a delay? Did it have something perhaps to do with the Russians?
It has two aspects as we saw it. The first one, they told a story, they told a lie, and the public opinion around the world and in the West didn't buy their story, but they couldn't withdraw. So they had to do something, even on smaller scale. The second issue related to the Russian position that time, as you know, that the Russians announced publicly that they're going to destroy the bases that's going to be used to launch missiles. And our information, we don't have evidence, we only have information, and those informations are credible informations, that they were thinking about comprehensive attack all over Syria. And that's why the threat pushed the West to make it on much smaller scale.
Well, with regards to the United States' relation towards you, President Trump has called you, quote, Animal Assad. Do you have a nickname for the US president?
Yeah. This is not my language, so I cannot use similar language. This is his language. It represents him. I think there's a very known principle that what you say is what you are. So he wanted to present what he is, and that's normal. Anyway, it didn't move anything, and this kind of language shouldn't move anything for anyone. The only thing that moves you is what people that you trust, people who are level-headed, people who are thoughtful, people who are moral, ethical. That's what should move anything inside you, whether positive or negative. Somebody like Trump will move nothing for me.
Well, with regards to the United States presence here, and there's an interesting thing, you know, I came up with, thought up of a while ago. There are now in Syria forces from five nuclear powers directly engaged in military operations in Syria, be it boots on the ground or airstrikes. Some of those countries are on different sides. How Syrian is this civil war still?
The word civil war has been used widely since the beginning of the conflict in Syria, even by our friends and by our allies, by mistakes, without understanding the content of this meaning. Syrian civil war means there are sectarian lines based on either ethnicities or sects or religion, or maybe political opinion or political currents, let's say. Something we don't have in Syria. In reality, in the area controlled by the government, which is now the majority of Syria, you have all these diversities. So the word civil war is not correct. What we have actually from the very beginning, mercenaries, Syrians and foreigners being paid by the West in order to topple the government. This is the reality, the mere reality, the very stark reality. Everything else is just masks to cover the real intentions, talking about political differences, moderates, peaceful administration. We don't have civil war in Syria. If we had civil war for 7 years, we should have been divided by now. You cannot have one country, united society, if not geographically, because now of the United States puppets and the Turkish puppet. Without that, you should have it divided socially. Go by yourself, deal with different spectrum of the Syrian society, and you can answer that question in the same way I'm answering now.
But with regards to potential escalation, okay, there are proxy forces from all these five nuclear powers, as well as their own forces engaged in Syria. But you, as the president, again, must have information. How close have we come during this civil war, during this war, to an escalation between these nuclear powers?
In reality, we were close to have direct conflict between the Russian forces and the American forces. And fortunately, it has been avoided, not by the wisdom of the American leadership, by the wisdom of the Russian leadership, because it's not in the interest of anyone in this world, and first of all, the Syrian, to have this conflict. We need the Russian support, but we need at the same time to avoid the American foolishness in order to be able to stabilize our country.
And just briefly, one last question. The closer we get to the end, is the danger of an escalation, in your estimation, is it decreasing or is it, on the other hand, increasing?
As I said at the very beginning, the more we get closer to the end, the more they want to make it farther. What does it mean? The more stability you have, the more escalation we'll have. The more reconciliation you have in one area, the more killing and destruction and trying to capture more areas by the terrorists will have. That's why within the reconciliation, when we started reconciliations in many areas, the other factions in the same area tried to destroy it because they have the orders from the outside not to go toward any reconciliation. Of course, you have the orders with a bucket of money. So what you say is correct, but the more escalations we have, the more determined we'll be to solve the problem, because you don't have any other choice. Either you have country or you don't have country.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your insights, and thank you very much for welcoming us here and giving us so much